right, we are back. Go ahead.
Well, I'm still stuck on the cut the crap segment. I want to go back into that just for a little bit, but that's okay. We're gonna keep it moving. We're gonna keep it moving. So,
if you will, I'd like to give a shout out to a few people before you get
go ahead. This is your show. You can shout out whoever you want.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to give a shout out to Thomas and Nicole. I'm gonna see myself. Thomas and Nicole Hartnett for their 10-year renewal of their marriage. We're celebrating here in Baltimore, Maryland, aka where are we in?
We're in Olin Mills, Maryland.
And we also want to give a shout out to the Olin Mill Marriott Hotel staff, led by Miss Whitney. Thank you, Miss Whitney, for taking care of us the way you are. We love you. We love the Hartnetts, and God bless you both.
Yeah, see that the customer service is really taking me back to that cut the crap segment. We're gonna keep it moving. Before we transition into our topic of discussion for today, we have some phenomenal men that are going to be here joining in the conversation. I would like for them to introduce themselves. You all have already met me, and we've been reacquainted. It's been some time that we've gone without seeing each other, but I would like for these gentlemen to introduce themselves and really just discuss how they plan on adding value to the conversation. I will start with Mr. Harper at the end of the table. Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right. Appreciate that, AD. My name is Robert Harper II, and I'm a motivational speaker, also a minister. I've been doing that for about 13 years now. Recently, within the last 2 years, I wrote a book called Talk to Yourself. It's really geared towards limiting or trying to attack those limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves from time to time. And so it's based upon 10 biblical principles that try to attack from a spiritual perspective, a psychological perspective, and a motivational perspective. And so did that. I was a teacher for some time, a Westbury Christian. And so I spent a lot of my time just trying to add value and trying to uplift those that are around me and serve however I can.
That's good. That's good. It's a great book. If you have not grabbed your copy, I suggest you do so, because as the book states, one of the most powerful conversations you're going to have is a conversation you have with yourself. All right. Thank you, my brother, for joining in the conversation. And then I would also like to introduce a resident thespian, in a sense, if you will. Luis, go ahead and introduce yourself to the family here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Luis. I'm an actor, went to school out in Katy, Texas, Seven Lakes with my homie, Christian. We went to school together. Represent, go Spartans. I just think that similar to my friend here, being a pastor, being an actor, we have a stage, we have a populace of people that we want to connect with and give guidance. And I'm really excited for this conversation. I've been a man my whole life.
You don't say.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
They're in the back. It's okay. Oh. It's a whole audience that's watching. It's okay.
Cool.
This is right up your alley.
Well, I'm flattered, and I'm excited to dig into this.
It's phenomenal. Thank you for being here, my brother. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Trae, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Just like Adonis said, my name is Trae Hodge. I am a co-founder of a media company called TKL Media Agency. My wife and I actually did this business together, and I'm kind of feeling some type of way. I'm doing a business with my wife, and I'm now at a speaking session talking about check your ego, which I've had to do many of times in this business. I don't know. I kind of feel it's a setup, but I'm happy I'm here. But my wife and I, we've been creating content for many, many years for people. Also, like my brother Robert, for him and some of his events. And we just decided to make a business last year in May. And our main thing is helping people create captivating video content for purpose-driven preneurs so they can stop stressing and being so overwhelmed about content marketing and get back to that thing that they're good at, and that's running their business. So I'm happy to be here. I'm excited about the conversation. I just don't want my wife to hear everything because I'm about to confess things that I've had ego on. So if you're listening, honey, Turn it off, please. Turn it off.
Well, I'm sure her and Val got together to ask some of these questions that we will be posing today because she likes to stir the pot, even though she's physically not here and she just can't stay away from the man's conversation. But it's okay. It's okay.
You know, I am going to try and stay in my lane. I said every month. Now it's up to you guys to really tell the truth. Don't dance around it. If you dance around it, then I'm gonna come into the conversation.
Real quick, brother Carter. How long have you?
I'll be the one to check because
we love you guys. Take the show on. Go ahead.
I love it. I love it. Let's get into this acronym that we'll be using to kind of guide this conversation.
Okay, so the acronym for the day is ESTEEM. E is for emotional, exhibiting emotion. S is for sanctimonious, acting better than everyone. T is for tough, strong, and durable. E is egotistical, self-centered. E is envious, jealous, desiring what others have. And M is masterful, skillful, and authoritative.
All right.
Some SAT words on that acronym. Okay. So when we dive into the ESTEEM acronym, which was so wonderfully laid out, individually, you guys can kind of chime in when you feel comfortable. Have you all ever struggled with self-esteem? And using that acronym kind of as a framework, have you all ever struggled with your own self-esteem?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, specifically from an acting perspective, you have to deal with rejection so much, right? You're putting yourself out there, and it's your body, it's your vibrations, your voice that's handling this text. For someone to go, oh, okay, well, I think I'm gonna go with somebody else.
Yeah, tough. That's tough.
So of course that has an effect on the morale of am I worthy enough to do this? Am I good enough to do this, to be competitive? Am I worthy enough to be the center of my peers' attention and to bring value to a conversation, right? But I think that kind of fluctuates for me. It kind of goes, right now my personal morale is high, it'll dip down, and I find momentum kind of like in a roller coaster or something going down the hill, that when I am going downhill, I try to ride that momentum so that I can push myself up the next hill.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. As a former athlete, esteem was something that I struggled with because as an athlete, it's natural to compare yourself to your peers, even if they're not playing the same position as you. I had the pleasure of playing college football, and I was a competitor at a high level. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a national championship team.
What team?
So Blinn College in Brenham. Won a national championship there in 2006, and then I transitioned to Bacon College in Oklahoma. So I was able to play with individuals who played at the professional level, and it's natural to see them and know that you, or perceive that you may be able to do something better than that person, and then to see them continue forward, and then your journey kind of be put on pause. Or if you even just think about in the weight room, when you're training, to see someone lift more weight or run faster or execute a drill more precisely than you, there's an area where you have to check yourself and say, okay, well, am I going to be as good, or can I be as good? Is this person better than me? So the esteem definitely was something that I struggled with when I transitioned from high school to college, because again, I was a teenager competing with individuals who were, older than I am, 19, 20, some of them even 21 years old. So that was definitely a struggle for me. As I've gotten older, not an issue at all, not a challenge. I'm very secure with my self-esteem, if you will. Robert, what about you?
Yeah, I would say so, man. Just simply because sometimes when you're in certain environments, you talk about esteem, the word, it talks about value or worth.
Yeah.
And sometimes certain environments you're in, whether in home or in your community, doesn't always validate that. It doesn't always affirm that you're worthy or that you have value. So we struggle with that, the idea of trying to create worth. How do I do that in the quickest way possible so that I can show that I do have value or worth, and I have self-esteem. And so sometimes those ways are superficial, sometimes those ways are toxic. And so for me personally, over the years, I've learned that in order for me to have self-esteem, it's based on the work that I put in. And so a lot of the confidence that I do have is based on the fact that I'm not pretending, I'm actually putting in the work. I've done the study and I've done the work. I'm actually not just trying to appear to be, but I'm actually being. And so when you do that, then you can walk in any room knowing full well that you're supposed to be there. You have confidence in that. So I think that's more authentic. That's more genuine. It's more a good foundation to have rather than just looking for superficial reasons to build yourself self-esteem. So
yeah, that's good. Trae, you mentioned being married. Shout out to the married people that are watching and listening. How has self-esteem played a role in the marriage that you are currently in, and just that relationship as a whole?
I would say it plays a really, really big role, just from the standpoint of, you come into a marriage with your own thoughts about yourself, the way you feel about yourself. And for me personally, I thought I didn't have anything wrong.
You thought your stuff didn't stink.
I thought, look, hey, I thought, that I just thought I was good. I was good where I was. But then I met my wife, who I loved so dearly.
Clean it up. There we go.
Well said.
And I love how honest she is with me, and how she can tell me the truth even when I don't really want to hear it. And so she's told me a lot. She's told me many times to my face, Trae, you're not all that. So I've had to, that can knock my self-esteem down at times, in the marriage, where I'm like, well, okay, well, maybe I'm not this guy that I always thought I was. What am I really? So I really had to check myself at the door of our marriage and really just like understand, okay, what is it that I'm doing or what is it that I thought I was doing that is well, but it's not pleasing to her, because that's who I'm in the relationship with. And then as I go through that process of growing in that area or becoming better, then that's when my self-esteem goes up. Because of course it gets knocked down when she tells me, Trae, you're not all that.
Yeah. But
she's still there by my side to help me go up as I grow in my journey, or whatever it is that she says I'm not all that good in myself. So she's played a major part.
Shout out to the wives. Can we put that esteem acronym back up? I want to look at that again, because one of the things that we're focusing on in this Men of Steel series is, of course, fixing your ego, and of course how you esteem yourself is closely associated with that. And one of the things in terms that is kind of becoming taboo in this day and age is that wonderful phrase, toxic masculinity, right? And we can go back and forth and debate how some people may think that phrase in itself is an oxymoron, but we're not going to dive on that today, because this is the Love and Victory show with Val. So when we think about toxic masculinity, how would you all define that?
Okay, I would describe that as...
I love the trepidation in your voice as you were trying to put that together.
I would describe that as... I'll put it like this. Sometimes we use these terms like you're a king. You're a king, and you're this and you're that, and we try to elevate people in trying to encourage them, trying to uplift them, and I think that's always good affirmations of that way. Always builds up people. But I want people to really see, like, when you say I'm a king, that's not in a way to try to boost your ego, but that's more so of a responsibility that you have.
Yes.
So if toxic masculinity is an individual who just sees their position as a way to boost their ego, instead of how can I serve others.
I do agree. I think there's there's a lot of narcissism that comes with the individual who actually is toxic in their masculinity.
Right.
So if you're the individual who is constantly focusing on me instead of we, whether that's in your relationship, the communities that you work within, or whatever, I think that can become toxic in how masculinity is perceived, whether it's by other men or women. It doesn't matter. Luis, when you think about toxic masculinity, let's shift this over into the theatrical side. How has that been perceived when you are going up for roles or looking to portray a particular character? Like, how does toxic masculinity play a role there?
Well, it's an interesting topic because when I think about it, I think of like the context of the human species, right? Like, and the thing of like some animals, like male animals, are like biologically bigger and have chemicals to make them more aggressive to defend whatever.
Because Luis is about 7 feet tall right now. Don't get it twisted. My brother came in and I was like, okay, he had the basketball in his hand. My brother's he should be hooping. Okay.
So I think throughout the course of human history, there's been kind of like a survival need for this kind of protector from danger, right? And that has, but now that we've advanced so much that we developed language, we've developed ways to diffuse conflict without the need for, I mean, not in all instances, but hopefully without the need for this violence. So now this idea of like, what does the man have to do? There's still just like this cultural thing of like, the man has to protect, the man has to provide, the man has to have the answers for the, these are like classic tropes that are now what we're being in question, right? Now there's like a surge of women earning more in the household than men, and that kind of equalization of bringing value to the household in that context, I think, is advancing this conversation. And I think of like frat bros, man. Yeah. I think of like what talks to masculinity. I think of like a bunch of people getting drunk and whoa and bragging about their, sexual conquests, having no regard for putting themselves into the shoes of these people who are there conquesting and their experience, whether like that was a thing. It's all about like getting the notch in the belt, or I can drink more. I can these burly primal things, more burly and more primal than anybody else. Yeah. That is the
but I'm sorry, guys, if you don't mind. I'm Miss Carter. I know I tried to sit back. I tried. Here's my thought on that. I think that a lot of times men, and I'm just from looking from the outside from a woman, I think you guys put a lot of that toxicity on yourself, how you view yourself and other based off of how you view yourself with another man. For example, I heard, I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with names. The gentleman with the hat on. Trae, you said something. Sorry. The one and only. You said something that was very key. Your wife would tell you you're not all that. And now when she was saying that to you from a woman's perspective, it's good that you recognize that she's still there with you. She's not tearing you down, but she's saying to you, you're stepping in these great shoes. You're putting out this energy like you got it all together when I know who you are back at this house, right? Yeah. So she's not coming from a negative perspective. You were walking out there kind of forgetting about your partner as if she's your assistant. Is that any of that going on in the business? That's why I wanted to come back with that.
So to answer that specific question, I have to answer. I would say I have to really think about it because
it was the for me. That's what it was for me.
So I want to say no, only because the percentage is. I would say I will probably do that maybe 2%. Like 2% out of us running the business and whatnot.
Not in a negative way, and I'm not saying that from a negative perspective. What I'm saying is sometimes most of the time as a man, you're there. You guys are there to protect, to lead, and we should follow. That's that old, that mentality. But we as women also have ideas. We're smart. We're driven, and we're capable. So finding that balance in that relationship, and especially when you're working with someone, your spouse, is very important that you hear her and she is partnered.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that my wife and I did. My wife's name is Logan, by the way. But one of the things that we did, one of the things that we did before we started our business, is we really started to understand each other as who we were and the value that we bring to our relationship. So my wife, she's a very straightforward person. She'll tell you the way it is, but she's a thinker. She will think about how things work, why things work, what won't work, and I'm more so of a firecracker. Like, let's just do it. Let's just get it done. So by understanding that in the relationship, we were able to transfer that into the business. And now we understand specific roles in our relationship. So I might wear the CEO hat at one point in time, but whenever I know there's an area of weakness that I'm working in, or we're working in at the time being, and I recognize it, then I say, hey, babe, this is when you step up. This is when you take over and make the decision, or you move us forward in this direction because you're a lot stronger in this area than I am. So I think the key to it, I think the key, I think the key to it for us was really identifying the value that each of us have, and then understanding where that value is best used. And then when we started the business, say, okay, now we can put that value into places, and we can start identifying roles, and then we can know when to switch roles. We know how to communicate with other. So it was a whole learning process before that business actually started. But I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I do have to check myself when I'm in the CEO role, because I know my personality. I'm like, well, let's get it done. Let's do it. And she's like, okay, well, pump your brakes. Let's do this. Let's think these things out. And that's when I have to step back and say, you know what, you're right. Let's proceed in the way that you're saying. So,
one thing I think, and Lucy, you mentioned this, environment is very important when it comes to how you are perceiving masculinity in a sense, right? So proximity is important. I think that many of us had a manly man in our life, whether it was your father, an uncle, a mentor, you name it. This was the pillar of manhood or masculinity. This is the person that you may have wanted to become, right? If this was the individual who was expressing toxic masculinity, or doing things in a narcissistic way, he was very individualistic in his thinking, trying to be competitive with things that didn't amount to anything. If you're looking at, who can drink the most, or who can have the most notches on his belt, I think those are things that are also important when we look at this current environment and how those individuals are perceiving it. Robert, you mentioned that you, of course, you've taught and you've been in the education sector. Do you think that it would be more beneficial to those children if they had more positive role models in the educational area that maybe looked like them, that were not exhibiting those traits that we just talked about before?
Oh, definitely. We all need examples, simply because if you see an example of a male that looks like you, that you can look up to and you admire, then you see that it's possible. Right. And so those are why we have those examples in our lives. So we're like, okay, as I navigate through my teenage years, my young adult years, or marriage, I want to be able to see a man who is doing that in a way. So yeah, definitely, for sure. Anytime you have examples like that, they give you hope. They're inspirational. So, because you don't have the blueprint. And so if you don't have a blueprint, you're just kind of winging it. You're trying to figure out. A lot of times we make a lot of mistakes because we are winging it, and we don't know how to really manage our emotions, those and recognizing that men and women are different, what's one of the things my dad used to tell me all the time, basically the way you relate to your woman is different than how you would relate to a man. Just sure. Understanding her emotions, understanding who she is, that you may say something to your boy Trae that she may get offended by. She may get offended by, or you may raise your voice in such a way where Trae wouldn't have a problem with it. But with her, you want to remain gentle. You want to remain under control, with those emotions and that passion. Not meaning that you're trying to hold back what you have to say, but you do it in a way where you're very conscious of your audience and who you're talking to, who you're speaking with. And so it doesn't take anything away from me to do that, because so I think sometimes men are just not aware of that difference, that I can say something to Trae and he wouldn't think anything of it. Right. You can't say that same thing to someone else, or that's your woman, because she may get offended by that. So just being conscious of that, moving in that way. And like I said before, understanding that I'm here to ultimately serve, and how can I best do that? So one of the things what I like about Trae is that in his relationship is that he's teachable, right? Is that I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to take advice, and I think one of the things from toxic masculinity is that they're not willing to do that. They're not willing to grow. They're not willing to learn, get better, improve.
Or rather, it's like the priority of being stubborn that's valued.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I don't care.
Right,
There
right.
is value in me disregarding your point of view.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes me more
Masculine.
manly,
And that's-
therefore higher in the ranks.
And that's where the ego steps in.
Right.
Right. And the scripture says that pride cometh before the fall, and
Come on.
your ego is connected to that. Right. So
Right.
your ego is connected to that. And if we're really diving into this series that is going on at the Love and Victory Show, thank you, each and every one of you, for listening in. We'd love to get your comments about this specific conversation, fixing your ego. When we want to fix your ego, we have to first acknowledge that we have one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the biggest thing. I think acknowledgement is something that, as men, when our pride steps in, our shoulders are square, our chest is up, and we want to just say, no, this is what it is. And as soon as that somebody comes in and pokes that inflated chest, and we just, okay, yeah, it's different. It acknowledging the fact that you have an ego, or you're being prideful about something that could potentially be toxic, and how it's connected to your masculinity is a hard conversation to have, or even just be receptive to. And I think that's something that we should all really be knowledgeable about, just the acknowledgement stuff. Because if we don't acknowledge it, we can't ever fix it.
Yeah.
We can't ever take any progressive steps to making change or fixing our ego. Brother Carter.
Yeah, the truth of the matter is, in my opinion, ego is a false sense of confidence. It's a temporary fix for things. We can put in our minds that we're better, we're bigger, temporarily. And so my whole idea about esteem and egos is sometimes egos get in our own way.
Yeah.
From like you guys are saying, from listening to something that's better, listening to reasons, listening to something that can actually give you value.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful with this ego thing, because it will get in your way.
I have a thought about
Go ahead,
that,
go
which
ahead.
is that I kind of think of ego as like a double-edged sword, right? And that in some parts, an ego is necessary. Like, you need to, like, there's a part of you that says, I deserve to have a better car. So I'm going to work towards I deserve to give my partner this standard of living. I have self-worth of myself to demand that from my life, and I will take actions to achieve that. But you can cut yourself with that sword if you don't know how to swing it right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start thinking that everything you're doing, then you start overestimating it, right? So I think finding that moderation.
I think one of the things that Robert mentioned as far as confidence is important, because a lot of times people confuse confidence with ego, right? And if I go back to the sports realm, my wife, when I would have conversations with her about just my athletic prowess, she would, in the early years, say that I was egotistical. And I was like, no, I'm not egotistical. I'm very confident in my abilities. I know what I can do. And it's not that I think that I'm better than the person that's across from me. I just know that person is working as hard as I am. I know that person is going to outwork me. Before we transition over to you, Robert, we do have a question that we want to hop into from some of our viewers. Let's dive into that.
Yes, we will have a section where we will kind of designate to Q&A, but I wanted to ask this really quickly because I thought it was really good with what we were talking about. Nicholas Morton on Facebook asked, can we control our ego?
Yeah. I think we have to control our ego. It's like my man was just earlier, like, ego or pride can be a good thing. It can be a healthy thing. I remember growing up, my mom would always say, have some pride in how you do things. Have pride in how you make up that bed. Have pride in how you move and how you act. And that's a healthy, good pride, right? But there's also a way where, like he was just talking about, where it can get in the way. It can mess up some things, hurt some people, right? And I think for me, the way I balance that with the word ego is like creating an acronym, edging God out. So I ask myself, is there any way in which I'm not humbling myself and I'm not being teachable? I haven't submitted myself to God. And so, like, if I'm going through life thinking that I am the best, I'm everything, I have my chest out, there's no humility in that. There's no self-reflection in that. There's no teachable spirit, so for me, that's kind of how I try to gauge my level of controlling my ego, right? And making sure also that, number one, that I don't get easily offended. I don't there's no need to get easily offended. Try to walk and have a spirit of humility about anything and everything that I do, being confident for sure, like you said before, because of the work that you put in, but also understanding that what's your intentions. So those are the three things I try to like govern my ego by, like check my motives, what are my intentions, let me walk in a spirit of humility, and the last one is just simply not being easily offended. I think especially when you're
thing is, Robert, excuse me, Robert, the thing about that,
He's gonna do that from time to time. So just roll with it. Just roll with it.
that is very essential for a person like yourself, but everyone cannot control their ego. We see that a number of times when men are pulling out a gun because somebody have taken a woman from him, and he go through the whole act of killing this man because he has no control over his ego. And so what can we do? What can we say to someone out there that think they cannot control their ego? What can we say to help them control that a little bit better so they can stop doing these
foolishness?
Going through the entire act.
So absolutely. So one of the things I think about, I go back to my foundation, and my foundation is in the Word. And one of my favorite preachers would say, Dr. Miles Monroe, he would say, in the beginning when God created us, he told us to have dominion, but he never said to have dominion over any people. He always told us to have dominion over things. So whenever it comes to checking your ego, you have to ask yourself, okay, is my ego trying to have dominion over somebody or something? Just like AD said, when he was in football, it was the ego over football. Like, hey, I'm going to dominate in football. I know Robert was speaking about certain things, or when it comes to Robert, he says, I'm going to dominate in speaking or preaching. Luis, I'm going to dominate in acting. But if you're saying, no, I want to dominate this person because they're not better than me, so on and so forth, then that's when it can get a little tricky. But if you keep in mind that I was created to subdue and have dominion over things and not people, that will give you a line to walk on, so you would stay tight on that line and never fall off. So just remember,
right there.
Just remember that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Luis.
I just wanted to like kind of echo that, and also tie in something that you said that really resonated with me, which is the idea of when we're talking to this person, right? How do we manifest this practice, right? How do we put it into action? I think what you said is so apt, which is practice that awareness and to humble yourself. To practice, how can you humble yourself? Because that requires self-awareness. That requires an outside perspective of, how did my actions just impact that other person?
Right.
What effect did that have? And was that positive or negative? And if it was negative, what can I do to rectify that in the present? And what can I do to prevent that from happening again? But that's a muscle like anything else. It's a muscle like practicing how to write, or practicing how to sing, or the practice of checking. I don't want to say checking yourself, because checking has that negative of like, oh, hold up. But when you say like, I humble myself, when people say I humble myself before the Lord, for example, it's an empowering thing that you're giving to yourself. You're saying, I'm investing in who I am without the noise of this artificial ego. So who am I at the core?
That's good. No, that's really good, man. Because how we perceive negative things in our lives, whether it be maybe you're in a relationship, on your job. My man just brought up earlier, hey, some conflict, right? How we perceive those things, those negative things that may happen in our life, that's when the ego rises, right? And you got to figure out, what am I going to do in this moment? And so for me, the idea is, what can I control? That's the question I ask myself in this very moment. Like, what can I control? Going back to what Trae just said, knowing for sure that I can't control people. I can't control my spouse. I can't control the weather, or I can't control traffic. These are things that sometimes make us really upset and can escalate our ego, get out of control. And so it's like, okay, what can I control in this very moment? I can control my attitude. I can control how I respond. I can control how I show up, right? These are things that are within my ability to control. When you try to control people, you become manipulative and people don't want to hang out with you because they think you have motives. And so if you are controlling your ego, a good question to ask yourself is, what can I control? And just navigating life through that way, understanding that people are, number one, they're going to offend you. Just get that out of the way. They're going to offend, no matter if you're at home, if you're in traffic, if you're at your job, people are going to offend you. People are going to criticize you for even the good that you try to do in the world, right? You have good intentions. You have good intentions towards somebody in the community or somebody in your home or somebody on your job, but yet still people still will try to find the negative and criticize you. And so I think for me, it's just understanding, what can I control? All the negative beliefs about me and their interpretation is none of my business, but I have to stay focused on, for me, this is what I say to myself, you have to continue to be mission minded. This is what you're here to do. You can't focus on what other people are saying and what they're doing. Continue to be the light. And the third thing is that you can't allow people who are just misguided to interrupt your calling. To serve. You know, it's like you have some compassion for people like that, right? So for example, if somebody's misguided, you're just not making right decisions and they're coming at you being negative, but you know you have right intention, you know you have the right motive. I'm not going to allow what you think about me to determine my actions, because I know who I am. You know, about who I am, my actions or even my ability to serve you is not predicated upon you knowing who I am, but it's predicated on me knowing who I am. And so I serve you lovingly and with a humble spirit.
That's good. So if you all haven't realized, even though he already mentioned it, Robert is a preacher and he will have 3 points for
He
every.
preaches too, Jack. He preaches.
Yes.
I love it.
He prepared a sermon notes.
I love it. Before we get to this question and comment, again, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. Thank you all for dropping those comments and questions here so we can keep this an interactive conversation. We mentioned asking the question, you know, can we control our ego? And I'll push back on you just a little bit, Brother Carter. I believe that we can. The problem is many of us have not been exposed to tangible ways to do so. Like nobody gives us the blueprint on how to, this is how you should do it, or this is how you should do it. Exactly. We can't go.
Just a disclaimer real quick. I didn't say you cannot control it.
I said they don't.
Yeah. There are some people that what I'm looking at seem like they cannot control it because they go through an entire act of killing someone over another person. And so this takes place every day of our lives. So, yes, you can control it, but how do we get the people that cannot feel like they cannot control it to control it a little bit better?
That's good. That's good. So let's dive into our next question.
Yes, so this one is actually for Val. Now, I know this is the men's conversation.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
I told you the Carter crew love Val.
Look, when y'all register for this app and y'all get these emails, we're gonna send them to you. In their disclaimer, it's gonna say Val is not on the men's call. Okay, she's not a part of this. This is for the brothers, for the fellas.
Damn, Manny over there.
Yeah.
We do have a quick question for Val. It's from Guillermo Watson, my bad, on YouTube. Val, did you suffer from any egotistical moment, or has your ego ever gotten in the way for you?
Yes.
There we go. We'll let him answer. You can give the example.
Since he wanted to answer the question, and he did answer it truthfully, because yes, if 100%, and I'll take it back to my early years in my career, into management. I went into management. I got the title, I got the position, and everybody's going to listen to me. And just because of my title. And it was a very humbling experience when I really had to check that at the door, because it took a lot of bumping my head for me. A lot of times I bumped my head a lot to get that, you know what, you're only as good as your team. But it taught me something about myself as well as people. that's why I'm an advocate for employees. When you build up a strong team, you take care of them, but you have to be honest. You have to allow them to be honest with you too. You have to give them a safe place to come and talk and share their concerns with you. So my answer to that is yes.
Yeah. And long story short, it's hard to control an alpha individual. Alpha individual have tendencies to allow ego to step into the way more than a non-alpha individual.
Oh, well, I'm so glad. I'm not a non.
I just wanted to make that point.
Sound like you're speaking to somebody. I don't know. I'm just.
I know. Who are you talking to?
To all the alpha people out there. I didn't say male or female.
Well, I can give my feedback on that at a later date. When we are diving into this conversation, Men of Steel, specifically fixing your ego. We've mentioned it before, but I would really like to dive into, practical ways to make this thing work, because we don't want individuals to come and share in this conversation and it be just that, a conversation.
You don't want that either.
Well, yeah. That was just we want them to not only come into the conversation, but leave with some type of tool, resource, something that will add value to their lives that will allow them to fix their ego. So I mentioned it. I believe the first step is, of course, acknowledgement. So if we had to go from acknowledgement to something else, the next step, Robert, what do you think step 2 would be? Not 3 points, just step 2.
Well, I just want to back up a little bit, because before we can acknowledge it, we have to be aware, right? I think for me, that was my struggle, is because when you're in an environment, you don't know that toxic. You don't know this is bad. This is your life. This is what you are accustomed to. And so for someone to come to me and tell me, you're not treating me right, I'm not being heard. I'm like, what do you mean? Because your environment has validated your behavior and what your actions and the places you've been in. So I would say for me, one of the biggest hurdles was just making sure that I'm aware of how my actions are being perceived towards others. And once I could understand, okay, let me be more self-aware of that. And when I became more self-aware and acknowledging that and having that knowledge, for me, it was realizing that a lot of that was rooted in some trauma, right? In something that was toxic in and of itself, right? And so when I would navigate through my relationships or navigate on my job or wherever I might be, I'm realizing that it's coming from a place of hurt. It's coming from a place where I'm trying to repress some things. I'm the lens in which I'm seeing you or this person is usually not healthy, and so I'm trying to really control my environment as much as I possibly can, so I can make sure that that I don't have anything that's coming my way that I don't foresee, right? And so I'm trying to limit all possibilities. I'm going to control this or control that. And so one of the things that God really had to work with me, talking about the idea of humility, is that the audacity of me to even think that I can control every variable in my life, right? Like, you can't do that. It's no possible that you can do that. And so kind of going back to what I was talking about before, is that instead of me trying to control everything in my life, it's more so about, for me, about being controlled by God. For me, it's like, okay, I can't control everything in my life, but I can humble myself and say, God, I can control my actions right now. I can control how I respond to her. I can control how I respond to him, but I can only do that with your help right now. Because I know the lens in which I'm seeing this right now may not be reality, may not be true, but the environment I grew up in makes it feel true, makes it feel real. And so I have to filter all that, talk to myself, another plug for the book, I have to talk to myself, but really just becoming more self-aware, I would say, AD, is that we have to become more. And then the way you do that is, I think, the experiences you have with people, having friends and loved ones that can be honest and true and say, hey, you don't have together. These are areas which I think you could grow and you can improve, and realizing that person's not an enemy, but a friend. Because most of the time, especially your wife, you know, if
Shouldn't be
you,
your enemy. That shouldn't be your enemy.
it shouldn't. If you look bad, then she looks bad, and vice versa. So she's trying to help you improve and get better. And so, whatever area that she believes that you can improve in, I think take inventory of that. Like, be teachable and be humble enough to listen, and then you can try to figure out, like, why am I seeing life this way, and try to deal with some of that kind of stuff, and not. So that would be my thing for me, is being more self-aware.
So we got awareness, and then once we become aware, we can now acknowledge that thing. Luis, what would you say would be the most important next step for someone who's looking to fix their ego?
You know, I would say that, and this is just a rough draft, so it's open to edits, right? As we're
once this becomes final, it is our IP. Don't be trying to steal it. We're going to trademark it and put it out for sale. Okay, so we got awareness.
This is a collaborative effort to solve this problem, right?
We have awareness, and then we have acknowledgement. What would be next?
So I think about some of the words that that brought up a lot are perception and reality, right? And your perception is your reality. Yeah. And this is something that I heard KRS-One talk about, which is the power of words.
Come on.
And how if you can shape someone's perception with your words, you can shape their reality, right? And the same is true for yourself. So let's take the gentleman here who killed somebody else over his wife or over his girlfriend, right?
The hypothetical,
but you know, it's also a true story, right? In many instances. But let's say that in his perception, his girlfriend was vengeful, hated him, and wanted to just like hurt him. Right? Those were the words he associated with this moment in his life, and that defined his reality. If he could talk to himself and question the words that he's using. Is she vengeful or is she unhappy? Right? That's a question. Is she trying to do this to get back at me, or is she trying to do this because she feels unloved and feels hurt? So all of these words that we talk about in ourselves, and you know, it's like when you're going through something, or like if I'm going through something that's especially traumatic, right? There are certain words that I will repeat in my head, and those words resonate and magnify themselves. So for me, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed with such a topic like this because it's so encompassing, so broad, to kind of break it down to a very, very simple, like, what is the next step? And that is to just identify the words you're using in that moment. What words am I using? Am I using, for example, the difference between checked and humbled, right? Humbled already has like that sense of warmth and generosity of spirit to it. So, and that's something that comes with acting, you know, because I'm looking at scripts and every little word is put something, or, you know, I listen.
There's meaning behind it.
Yeah. Or music, you know, music lovers. It's like, why did this person choose this word and in this way? Because it carries meaning. So I would say that is something that is simple, not necessarily easy, but simple. That you can do for yourself.
That's good.
Question those
That's
words.
good. We got to transition before we go, because I want to get Trae's point before we dive into the questions and answers. But we definitely come right back to you, Robert. So we have identify or increase your own level of awareness, acknowledge where you are in that process. I'm sticking with the A theme. I got a little me too. Amen. Analyze your situation, right? Okay. Analyze the information and things that you're saying to yourself, Trae. No pressure. If you can get it to start with an A, that'd be even better. What about you? What would be your next step in that line of thinking to actually fix your ego?
So I'm gonna just let you know right now, it's not gonna be an A.
I'll find something.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking of it because I was listening to Robert speak. He said aware. AD, you said acknowledge, you said perception, or what was
analyze.
Analyze.
What I say.
Excuse me. But for me, I would say it's understanding. You got to understand what it means to be a man, and I know sometimes it's hard because we have a lot of decoys of what a man is from TV, from radio, in some cultures, you know, the music. We have a lot of decoys of what a man may look like, but when you really have a foundation in the word, which this is for me, I have a foundation in the word, and in the word, I don't know if in the word it says this, but I know the man is the head of the household. But whenever I look at that, instead of myself looking at myself at the top on the roof, I flip it upside down, and I'm the foundation that holds my family up. So that's more so what I look at when it comes to how to make it practical for myself. I make it practical by whenever I'm making a decision, I'm saying, hey, is this going to take my family further, or is it going to back? Is the decision, or is talking to me like this going to help my son, or is it going to hurt my son? So I'm always looking at it from a foundational standpoint. Yes, I am the head of the household, but number one, the head cannot run without the neck. But also, I am holding my family up based on the word and the foundation that I have. And my word and my foundation is the word in the Bible. So
that's good. That's good. And
can you make an A out of understanding?
I will go to my thesaurus here pretty soon and see if I can find one for understanding. Robert, you were going to chime in when Luis was talking about the analytical side as far as processing the things that you're saying to yourself or processing the things and information as it's coming to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, being more collective in in our speech, like when you're talking to someone, instead of saying, you always do this, or you need to do that, that's very accusatory. It's like, man, I'm always do this, or you, and people can get on the defense like that. And so instead of saying you go do that, let's say, let us go do that. Right. And so let us work together to do that. And so now a person's defense is down because they know that they have a friend, they have a partner, they have someone that they're in with, right? Using words like that, being more mindful, being more careful and not careless in how we use our words can be very helpful. Like it's more collective and not individualistic, and accusatory. And I thought about something that Trae said earlier, is that when you're the leader of your home, or you're the head of your home, or however you want to describe it, I think what makes people follow you is that they're understanding that you are willing to sacrifice yourself for them and not the other way around. Like they're not going to be sacrificed, right, for for what you want and your desires and your goals, right? And so, like, as a leader, I'm like, yeah, as a follower, yeah, I'm willing to follow you, because I know that at any moment, during any situation, you're willing to sacrifice yourself and put yourself on the line for the entire family, and it's not the other way around, where your pride, your ego is leading us or driving us, and so then you sacrifice the family. And so I think as a leader, as a man, anyone, when you talk about ego, you have to be willing to be sacrificial. And going back to what we talked about earlier, when you realize that saying words like king or you're a man, those are not ego boosting terms or words. Those are terms that you need to understand the responsibility.
That's right.
That comes with being a man, being a leader, right? That people are depending on you. And I think when you really soberly think on that and contemplate that, it should kind of, I wouldn't say scare you, but it should sober you up to the reality that this is not something to be played with. This is a serious responsibility.
That's good. That's good. I think before we transition into our break, I think what you had mentioned with regard to responsibility and then the sacrifice that the leader should make. Again, when we're talking about relationships, the perfect model of a relationship from a scriptural context is the bride and groom, which would be Jesus and the church. The church didn't sacrifice themselves for Jesus. It was the other way around, because Jesus gave himself wholeheartedly for the church, so that the church could continue on. Could he have, said, you know what, I'm going to switch these things up and y'all gonna die for me? He could, but there would be no reason for that to take place. But as a good leader, he was out in front and he took the snares that he needed to, so that those behind him, the church, could actually benefit the most. We're going to transition into our first break before we close this thing out. Thank you all for being a part of the Love and Victory Show with Val. We'll be right back.
Also, while we're on our break, make sure you guys are asking us questions. We're going to come right back with a Q&A segment. So go ahead and leave your questions down in the comments. We're on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll be answering those questions live.
Welcome back. We are here with some phenomenal masculine men, not toxic at all. And we have been really breaking down the conversation centered around fixing your ego here at the Love and Victory Show with Val. My name is Adonis Mitchell. I am your guest host for today. You all can call me AD, as everyone has been doing so affectionately. The conversation has been great, but we don't want this a one-sided affair. We want to dive into some of the questions that have been posed by the fans in the audience, because I think that will add a little bit more perspective and value to this conversation as a whole. What's our first question?
All right. Our first question is from Howard Hale. Do you think men have more ego than women?
Most definitely, without question. Without,
That's pretty quick, eh?
don't even have to pause to reminisce and think. Yes, men for sure. I think because of the environment that we have consistently been brought up in, it is natural for us to be around men who may be exhibiting that toxic form of masculinity, and because we are around that from a young age up into our adolescent years when our mind is the most impressionable, that's one of the reasons why we experience that. I think in a general sense, I don't want to say all, but in a general sense, I think young girls, when they are in an environment with other women, I don't think it's the same. I could be completely wrong, but I think their experience as they are going and matriculating through their journey is different than that of a young boy. Young boys are, taught to play sports, stop crying, don't express emotion, whereas young girls have much more freedom and capacity to do those things because of the sense of vulnerability that's attached to that, whereas young men don't normally get that. And now, as adults, we are asked to become vulnerable and become more transparent, which is challenging because we're holding on to the one thing that we can control, which is that ego.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called testosterone.
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 He gave it a
That's what it's called.
That's a new one. Okay.
No, it's not testosterone. Wow, so
Y'all know what it is.
We do. Now. We got it now. What about you, Trae?
Okay, I was like, where's the question?
It's right
there. I mean, I just kind of piggybacking off of what you said, how a lot of times women growing up have time to exercise that emotional side of things. So they're able to practice it a little bit more and express themselves to where now they understand, okay, I am this, I would say a lot of ego, the result of ego comes from vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Once you kind of step back and said, okay, this is what I'm going through, this is where I am, you grow from it. Then that's when you can go into, okay, well, I got a little backbone. And because us as men and boys, when we grow up, we're just taught one way, like, hey, you got to be tough, you got to be hard. And as we become adults and get into marriage and get into relationships, we have to learn that being vulnerable is the first step, and then that's when the growth can happen. So we have we're a little behind when it comes to that I would just say from a social standpoint, because we haven't been taught that in the beginning like a lot of women and girls have. But that's kind of what I would say. But yeah, to answer the question, women definitely have a higher ego or more ego than men. I don't know.
I think you flipped that. I think you flipped that, but that's okay. That's all right. Let's hop into another question if we have one.
So I have another question, and this one I kind of want to add to. Oh wait, hold on. I think I picked the wrong question. What is the difference between ego and self-respect? And so the reason I picked this question is because I have a habit of telling people they're mansplaining to me.
Mm-hmm. Is that when a man explains something to a woman?
Yes. Yes, but I say that to men, women. I say it to everybody. My ego gets in the way sometimes where I don't want to be given advice or explain something that I feel I already know. Yeah. So where, like, I like this question because, like, where can I maybe draw that line between like ego but like also still maintaining my self-respect? Like if someone's clearly like explaining something to me like I'm a child, you know what I mean?
Luis, because you had mentioned this before when it came to really identifying things internally. How would you go about answering this one?
Well, I think about the words that we're using: ego and self-respect. And ego in its current social setting feels more like a negative, right? They have a big ego, an inflated ego. The word ego carries with itself something that wants to be changed. But self-respect feels like it's a gauge, like on my odometer, on my dashboard of like how I'm doing internally. But when you're talking about, if I'm watching somebody's interaction, like let's say I'm an audience member and I'm watching a play and I'm watching this character do something, and I'm trying to decide whether I think they're doing that out of ego or whether they're doing that out of self-respect, I think you have to look at the intention behind it, right? So if the intention behind it comes from like a defense of like, and this is again just rough draft, but as I'm thinking about it right now in real time, I think like ego is kind of like that defense of like, like over defensive, like, I feel flustered.
Yeah.
And self-respect carries with it a sort of calmness, a sort of like
Peace that comes with that.
self-assuredness. That's like, I respect myself enough to like not let you talk to me that way. And I hope you have a nice day. Rather than the ego being like, did you just talk to me that way? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's like something about like the public display of like, I will not tolerate this, and I have to let other people know that I will not tolerate that. Rather than asking that question for yourself, being like, hey, no one else needs to know this because I already have confidence that I know for myself that I won't tolerate that.
Do we have any more questions? Yeah. Good. I want everyone to have a chance to answer.
Sorry.
No. That was a great answer. I want to make that we have more to work with before we pass it around. Yeah, go ahead.
This one is going to be a little more anecdotal. Sorry.
We're using all the SAT words today, boy.
You know. I got that ego, so I got to put the big words to show.
Robert, this will be for you.
The question is from Joseph Sanchez on Facebook. Hello, Joseph. Did you have an egotistical moment in your life where you realized that ego might be the reason? And I kind of want to piggyback because there's another question that I think will go well with this from Lauren Burt. How can a relationship become toxic because of ego? So kind of tying the two.
Okay.
Name a time you've been egotistical in a relationship and it's affected the relationship.
For sure.
I got Robert talking about relationships. Okay. Come on.
Keep it real.
Yeah, let's go, Reverend relationships.
Yeah, Reverend Robert on relationships.
Hey,
for sure. There's been many occasions where my ego has gotten in the way and probably hurt some relationships that I had no intention to, that wasn't my intention, right? That wasn't my motive to try to hurt it, but it was my ego getting in the way. So I would say, just the way we perceive respect, right? The way we perceive certain things. Like, for example, a person can say something to you, but if you perceive them already as a threat, then you can't receive what they're saying to you because that's the lens in which you see things, right? And so if you perceive this person as a threat, as an enemy and not a friend, then every little thing you're trying to judge or trying to figure out their motive, and you're less inclined to operate in a spirit of love, and you're more inclined to operate in a spirit of fear because you're in protective mode. You're a guy, you want to protect, you're even yourself, and so the idea is, if you perceive that a person's actions is, accusatory, or they're your enemy, or they're trying to hurt you or harm you, then that ego will come out, and you may say something in a way that can be hurtful or harmful, and you be more careless with your words, or less gentle with your words. And so I've had moments like that in my life where I look back on it and say, man, that person was actually for me and not against me. And if I would just been more humble enough to listen to them and take their advice, then it probably would have been more beneficial to me. And through trial and error, you learn those things, becoming more self-aware understanding that you responded that way because you weren't secure in yourself. And I think for men, that's even difficult to acknowledge, right? I'm not insecure, I'm secure in who I am, and sometimes we're not, and sometimes the way we're looking at life is the way we perceive life is not the way that it should. It's flawed. And so one thing that I think about when someone offends me or says something to me, even when I show up to a conversation, my mindset is, how can I serve? How can I be a blessing to this individual, this person? And so that allows you to not get so easily offended, right? And so when a person says something to you that someone could perceive as being offensive, you don't take it that way. You can think to yourself and ask yourself, this person is operating in a way that I've been there before. Have you ever acted that way before? And so if that is, instead of anger, you should show that person sympathy. You're like, you know what? Hey, I've done that before. I've done that action before. And so I'm gonna show some sympathy towards this person. Or if
that's good, Reverend Robert. That's good, Reverend Robert. For the sake of time's sake, we want to give someone else an opportunity. I don't need to take over there, AD, but
no, I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking at the clock.
Yes, sir. There's some key points. Really good. But I'm Brother Carter from Keep It Real Radio also. And my thing is, ego gets in the way every time we've laid with a woman that's not our spouse.
He's going there. Okay. Wait a minute.
Yes, I'm going all the way there.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I need some more tea. Aaron, I need some more tea.
No regard to their hearts, our ego got in the way. So this is from Keep It Real Radio. Yes.
Keep It Real Radio. This is not associated with the Love and Victory Show at Val. Okay.
I think ego gets in the way in how we navigate our relationships and how we talk. Because sometimes as men, if we're just like being real, sometimes we're not trying. If you're pursuing a woman, and sometimes a woman can be so confused and saying, why did you go through all of that if you're not, wanting to build a relationship with me? You've been talking to me for 3 months. Or whatever. And sometimes for the man, it's more ego driven. Right. It's more the idea that I can.
Now you're talking, Rev. Now you're talking.
I can, right? So
he's gonna have to be a guest on your show, Brother Carter, over there on Keep It Real Radio, which actually streams after the Love and Victory Show.
So yeah, I think ego gets that way too.
So that's like Band-Aid. That's like Band-Aid for something that needs stitches.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we close this thing up, I would love for you all to give some final thoughts. And we kind of have this makeshift, in a sense, blueprint for how to fix one's ego. Robert kicked things off with becoming more aware, not only of your environment, but how you are perceiving information and how you are being affected by the information that is being channeled through that environment. And then acknowledging the role that you play, right? After that, we want to analyze the information that we are receiving, the information that we are saying to ourselves, the conversations that we're having with other people. So now we have to become analytical with what it is we're doing, and then understand that information that we have processed, right? Because it's one thing to take information in, it's something totally different to actually understand it. The last thing, and I think is the most important, is to actually act. Yeah. But we got to make a change at some point in time, right? Yeah. There's action that goes into, okay, I have all this information. I've become more aware. I know the role that I've played. Now it is my responsibility to bridge that gap, in a sense, between where I once was and where I want to be, especially when it comes to fixing your ego. So with regard to our final thoughts, I'll leave the floor open. Please be sensitive to time, because we don't want Keep It Real Radio to hop back on. Any final thoughts that you all may have? I'll start with you, Trae.
Yeah, I would just speak from the building a relationship and a business standpoint. I think it's what helped us was understanding each other first, learning each other first, and really getting a feel of the value each other has before starting a business. So if you are in a relationship right now, or you're wanting to be in a relationship, but you also have entrepreneurial tendencies, entrepreneurial ideas, and that's the person you want to be with, someone that has that same idea, make sure you focus on understanding you first, because you got to know how, you got to check yourself Then you want to understand the person that you want to be with, and last, that's going to add up together to bring a result of a beautiful business, because you'll be able to function together, work together, communicate well together. So that's my final thought.
And all you're getting,
Come on.
get an understanding.
Yeah.
And also, while we give our final thoughts, could you tell us first also your experience on the Love and Victory show and how you feel about today,
Okay.
and also where we can find you if you have any like website.
Oh, I was going to open the floor for that. I want them to answer quickly so we
Okay.
can get back to that.
Okay.
You know, some folks, Trae, don't like
Yeah.
to, go ahead, Robert. Robert, we'll come to you next. Amen.
Okay. Anything I would share just a quick story real quick. I was sharing with you guys during the break. There was a story, real true story. And we're in, Black History Month, but Booker T. Washington had an experience where he was walking in this exclusive town. I'm sharing this story because it deals with ego and pride and things of that nature.
And it's in your book.
Yeah, it's in my book, chapter 9, the book, Talk to Yourself. But Booker T. Washington was walking in this very affluent, wealthy area, and a white woman came up to him, and she asked him. Now, mind you, Booker T. Washington is the president of Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, so he's not short of money or anything like that. He's done well.
You're doing all right.
He's doing well. And but she came to him and she asked him if he would cut some wood for her for some extra money, and for cut it and for some extra money. And the story goes that he paused for a moment and he proceeded to do the humble chore. And not only did he do it, but he took the logs and he put it in her house and by the fireplace and stacked it and told her, have a great day. And so as she leaves, someone notices him and brings it to her attention. She knew him by name, but not by sight. And so she said, that was Booker Washington from the president of Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. So, and she immediately felt a sense of sorrow, right? Like I shouldn't have, because I knew how my actions could have been perceived, and so she goes the next day to the school, to his office, and she apologizes profusely. She's just like, she's apologetic, and she's saying, I hope you didn't take it that way. And she just said, basically, I'm hoping that you receive this apology. And he said, no problem at all. He said, every so often I enjoy, in fact, doing an humble chore. And it's always a joy to do something for a friend. And so she was really, she was so softened by his response, and she was endeared by the fact that he had such a meek and humble spirit. And so, and it compelled her to donate thousands of dollars to the institute. But not only that, she persuaded friends of hers to do the same thing. And so I took away from that story was that a lot of times people can perceive people who walk in humility as being weak, or they're preyed upon, or they're vulnerable. And so I don't want to be humble. I have to let my ego shine, right? But when we walk in humility, when we know who we are, right, we can serve others well. And that doesn't that attracts people to you, because they see you as an individual who's confident, who's secure, and a person who's willing to serve and sacrifice themselves. And so, there's great value in being a person who walks in humility and knowing who you are and not being so easily offended.
That's good. That's good. Luis, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say that to all of my male friends who are looking for help, to just practice empathy.
Yeah.
Actively practice empathy, and just make it a part of how you conduct yourself. And another thing that I think about is when I'm listening to somebody, that I'm really listening to understand rather than listening to respond. So I would say that those are two things that I kind of crystallize at the end of this conversation for me.
That's good. And before we get into where we can connect with each and every one of you, I think as we go through this process of fixing your ego, one of the things that has been consistent is environment, right? And as a man who is going through his own individual journey, the thing that has benefited me the most is connecting myself with like-minded individuals and becoming a part of communities that are not only forward thinking, but heavy on accountability. So it's very easy for me to see the different areas where I need improvement, because I have individuals that are pointing it out, and I respect them enough to do the same to them. Before we wrap, I would love to know what projects you maybe have going on and where we can actually connect with you all. Luis, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm going to be doing a play in Houston at Spring Street Studios. It's called Fourth Wall Theater Company. The play is called Sanctuary City. It's great. It's like a 3-actor play, really small black box. I encourage everybody to go. It's going to be awesome production, directed by Philip Lale. The date, it's going to be in March. March is the run. We start rehearsals on the 20th. I'm writing this hip hop adaptation of Euripides, so that's going to be workshop off Broadway at Red Bull Theater in May, with maybe a future production in 2024, y'all. So keep tuned to that. Follow me on Instagram, Don Luis Quintero, and thanks y'all so much for having me. This was really fun, y'all.
God bless you.
I love it. Reverend Robert, the good right Reverend, where can we connect with you and any additional projects you have coming up?
For sure. Instagram is Robert Harper II. You connect me on there. Also Facebook, just Robert Harper II. My website is robertharper2.com. So all those platforms, and on there you can also see the book. It's called Talk to Yourself. It may be the best conversation you have all day. And like I said before, the book is just 10 principles that I think that will help us try to limit some of those negative beliefs that we have about ourselves and other people. And you can follow me on YouTube as well. Some of the things I post on there. But yeah.
All right. God bless you.
And Brother Hodge.
So you can follow me on Instagram, Trae Hodge, Trae Hodge. You can also follow our business page, TKL Media Agency. We're doing a little rebranding, so the website is actually that kind of media. You can see our portfolio, see a lot of things, but most importantly, we create captivating video content for purpose-driven entrepreneurs. So if you kind of fed up with the content creation and the content marketing, that's what we take care of. So that's how you can get with us.
Great work too. They did great work.
And of course, before we kick it over to the normal host, my name is Adonis Mitchell, but you can call me AD, and I always coach individuals and corporations on how they can bridge the gap. It's not your fault that there is a gap, but it is your responsibility, better yet, your duty to bridge it. As I stated before, I coach individuals and corporations, and that is something that I am passionate about. If you would like to connect with me, feel free to do so at AD_speaks across all platforms. I would love to connect with you, have a one-on-one session, or come and have a conversation with your staff or the individuals in your company. I will kick it over to our phenomenal host, who are virtually in another city, but they are still, it feels like they're right here. They're just right here.
Well,
and on the ends. But that's okay.
Before the host take over, so we're going to let her have the final word because she is the host. I want to leave a few things for the Carter crew listeners out there, scriptural based it. First of all, for the brothers, number one, a man that thinketh himself to be something when he's nothing, he only deceives himself. Number two, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. And number three, God said in the Bible, said, I give you three things: the gift of power, love, and a sound mind. And so we need to lean into these different scriptures to get a foundation, like the brother's been saying all day long. Grab some kind of foundation in the Bible-based foundation in life, and it'll carry you a long way, especially with that ego thing. Thank you, Adonis, for doing a wonderful job on the show. We love you so much. And before the host take over, I want to welcome all three of you guys. Anytime you'd like to be on the show, you're welcome to be with the Love and Victory Show with Valerie. I'm your main man, Brother Carter. Talk to you later.
And for me, I'm just so grateful. I'm so proud. When we went to break, I was back there high-fiving my husband, telling him it's good to go on vacation and leave the gift that God has blessed us with in great hands. You guys have done a phenomenal job. I'm so proud of you guys. And each one of you, if there's anything that the Love and Victory Show with Val can do, your host,
Mhm.
call me. I'm there. I mean it with everything inside of me. You guys have made me proud. Thanks for letting me enjoy my vacation. I was only going to stay on for a little while, and I actually kept my
Mhm.
mouth closed, right?
Mhm.
I enjoyed it so well. That's why I was able. So, and Adonis, uh, my son, my son, I love you so much. You did an amazing job. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be able to fill in on vacation. This is the second show that I've been on when y'all been on vacation. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah.
Y'all
You
was
are
in
a vacation takeover person.
Yeah.
Mm,
You have my spirit, so I can put you in that seat.
That's fine. Y'all was in Jamaica. I didn't get an invite. Y'all in Maryland now. Didn't get. I would like some crab cakes, but that's okay. Go ahead. Do your thing. But no, we collectively appreciate the opportunity that you all have gifted us by trusting us with the platform that you've created by coming on and sharing our perspective with this particular conversation. So we look forward to having more conversations in the future. Shout out to the staff. They've been phenomenal with
Amen.
taking care of us and getting us going. So we'll see y'all next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Fix your ego.